Jerusalem. Passover week. The city is swollen to nearly 3 times its normal size. Pilgrims press through narrow stone streets. Roman soldiers line the walls, hands resting on spear shafts. The air is thick with tension. This is the season when Israel remembers liberation from Egypt, and Rome knows revolutions are often born from memory. 3 years earlier, an unknown carpenter from Nazareth began speaking in villages no one important cared about. He had no army, no political title, no wealth. Yet crowds followed him. His name was Jesus. He spoke of a kingdom, but not Caesar's kingdom, not Herod's kingdom, not Rome's empire. He spoke of the kingdom of God. He healed the blind without incantations. He touched lepers without fear. He forgave sins, something only God was believed to have authority to do. And that is when the alarm bells began ringing. Because in first-century Judea, forgiveness of sins was not just theology. It was power. The temple leadership maintained religious authority. Rome maintained political authority. But Jesus spoke as if he carried both. When he entered Jerusalem days before Passover, riding on a donkey, fulfilling the ancient prophecy of Zechariah, crowds shouted, "Hosanna!" Palm branches hit the ground like a royal carpet. It looked like a coronation. It felt like rebellion. The religious leaders could tolerate a teacher. They could even tolerate a miracle worker. They could not tolerate a Messiah. Behind closed doors, plans were set in motion. One of his own disciples, Judas Iscariot, agreed to betray him for 30 pieces of silver. A calculated sum, the price of a slave. That night, Jesus gathered his closest followers in an upper room. Oil lamps flickered, bread was broken, wine was poured. He spoke words that must have sounded impossible. "This is my body, given for you. This is my blood, poured out." They didn't understand yet, but he did. Later, in a garden called Gethsemane, beneath twisted olive trees older than empires, Jesus prayed alone. The Gospel accounts describe something extraordinary, his sweat falling like drops of blood, a rare medical condition triggered by extreme distress. He was not surprised by what was coming. He was crushed by it. When soldiers arrived with torches and swords, Judas stepped forward and kissed him, a sign of identification. The arrest was swift. The trials were illegal. First before the Jewish council, then before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, then sent to Herod, then back again. False witnesses contradicted each other, accusations shifted. But the charge that sealed his fate was clear. He claimed to be king. Pilate saw no crime deserving death. Roman records show crucifixion was reserved for insurrectionists, rebels, and slaves. It was public terror, a warning nailed to wood. Yet political pressure mounted. The crowd, stirred and manipulated, roared, "Crucify him!" Pilate washed his hands, a symbolic gesture, but history would never forget his name. Jesus was scourged. Roman scourging was not a beating. It was calculated destruction. A whip embedded with bone and metal tore flesh from muscle. Many died before reaching the cross. He survived. A wooden beam was forced onto torn shoulders. He stumbled through streets lined with people who days earlier had shouted praise. Outside the city walls, at a place called Golgotha, the skull, the execution began. Nails were driven through wrists and feet. The cross was lifted. Gravity did the rest. Crucifixion killed slowly. Victims suffocated as their own body weight crushed their lungs. Every breath required pushing against pierced feet. Above his head, a sign read in 3 languages, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." It was meant as mockery. It became prophecy. Darkness fell over the land at midday. Ancient historians outside the Bible would later reference unusual darkness around that period. Whether atmospheric or miraculous, witnesses agreed. Something was wrong. Then came the final cry, "It is finished." Not a whisper of defeat, a declaration. And then, silence. A Roman centurion, hardened by countless executions, looked up at the lifeless body and said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Even Rome felt it. A wealthy council member named Joseph of Arimathea requested the body. It was placed in a newly cut tomb, one no one had yet used. A large stone, weighing perhaps 1 to 2 tons, was rolled into a carved groove sealing the entrance. But sealing a tomb wasn't enough. The chief priests remembered something the disciples had nearly forgotten. Jesus had predicted he would rise after 3 days. So they went back to Pilate. "Place a guard," they insisted. "Make it secure." And so it was. A Roman seal, a cord stretched across the stone and stamped with official wax, was placed over the entrance. Breaking it was punishable by death. Armed soldiers stood watch. The movement was finished. The leader was dead. His followers were scattered. And for all of Saturday, Jerusalem returned to normal. Vendors reopened stalls. Priests performed sacrifices. Families gathered for Sabbath meals. But somewhere in the city, behind locked doors, 11 men sat in fear. If Rome executed their teacher, what would they do to his students? Hope had collapsed in less than 24 hours. They had believed he would overthrow oppression. Instead, he had been crushed by it. Night fell, and the tomb remained sealed. History held its breath. Before dawn on the first day of the week, Jerusalem was quiet. The Sabbath had ended. The city still slept. A small group of women moved through the darkness carrying spices. Their steps were careful. Their grief was heavy. They were not going to witness a miracle. They were going to finish a burial. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Salome. Ordinary names, unimportant in Roman records, invisible to historians of empire. And yet, history was about to pivot around them. As they approached the tomb, one practical concern troubled them. Who will roll away the stone? It was a reasonable question. The stone had been massive, the Roman seal unbreakable. The guards trained killers. They expected obstacles. They did not expect absence. The ground had trembled earlier. Whether earthquake or something more, the accounts agree, the stone was no longer in place. It had not been rolled away to let Jesus out. It had been rolled away to let witnesses in. The tomb was open. The guards were gone. Inside, the body was missing, and the burial linens lay there, collapsed, as if whatever had occupied them had passed through. Panic came first. Mary ran. Peter and John sprinted through narrow streets toward the tomb. John arrived first, but hesitated at the entrance. Peter did not hesitate. He stepped inside. Empty. No signs of struggle, no sign of theft. Grave robbers did not unwrap bodies carefully and leave expensive linen behind. They left confused, still not understanding, but confusion was about to turn into something far more dangerous. According to the earliest records preserved in the letters of Paul, written within decades of the event, Jesus appeared alive to individuals, then groups, then crowds. To Mary Magdalene in a garden, she mistook him for the gardener until he spoke her name. To 2 travelers on the road to Emmaus, they walked miles beside him without recognition until he broke bread. To the disciples behind locked doors, and suddenly he was there, not a ghost, not an apparition. He invited them to touch his wounds. He ate broiled fish in front of them. He spoke, he breathed. One disciple, Thomas, refused to believe. "Unless I see the nail marks, unless I place my hand in his side, I will not believe." 8 days later, Jesus appeared again. "Put your finger here." Thomas fell to his knees. "My Lord and my God." This is not how legends develop. Legends grow slowly, in distant lands, generations removed from eyewitnesses. But the resurrection was proclaimed immediately, in the same city where Jesus had been executed. And here is what makes it explosive. Women were listed as the first witnesses. In first-century Jewish and Roman culture, female testimony was not considered legally reliable. If you were inventing a story to persuade skeptics, you would never begin there. Yet the accounts do, because that is what happened. The authorities responded quickly. They bribed the guards, spread a counter-narrative, tell people the disciples stole the body while you slept. But Roman soldiers falling asleep on duty faced execution. And how would sleeping guards know who stole a body? The explanation was weak. The tomb remained empty, and then something even more astonishing occurred. The disciples changed, not gradually, instantly. Weeks earlier, Peter had denied even knowing Jesus to avoid arrest. Now he stood in Jerusalem within sight of the very authorities who crucified his teacher and declared, "You killed him. God raised him. We are witnesses." 3,000 people responded in a single day. This was not safe. This was not strategic. This was suicidal, unless it was true. Over the next years, persecution intensified. Stephen was stoned. James was executed by Herod. Peter was eventually crucified upside down. Paul, once a persecutor of Christians, claimed to have encountered the risen Christ and became the movement's most tireless missionary. He endured beatings, shipwrecks, imprisonment, and ultimately execution in Rome. These men gained no wealth, no political power, no comfort, only suffering. And yet none recanted, because they were not defending philosophy. They were testifying to what they claimed to have seen. Within 3 centuries, the Roman Empire, which had tried to crush the movement, adopted the very faith it once persecuted. The symbol of execution became the symbol of hope. The cross moved from instrument of terror to emblem of redemption. Empires rise through force. This movement rose through resurrection. And the claim remains staggeringly simple. A dead man walked out of his grave. If it is false, Christianity collapses. If it is true, history has a center point. The resurrection is not merely a miracle claim. It is a declaration that death does not hold ultimate authority. That injustice will not have the final word. That sacrifice was not wasted. On that morning, the sun rose over Jerusalem like any other day. But nothing was ordinary again. A stone had shifted, a tomb stood empty, and fear began to dissolve into courage. 2,000 years later, skeptics still debate, historians still analyze, believers still proclaim, but the question has never disappeared. What happened to the body? Because something did, and whatever happened was powerful enough to turn cowards into martyrs, fishermen into revolutionaries, and a Roman world upside down. The resurrection does not ask for comfortable agreement. It demands a response. If he rose, then hope is not fragile. If he rose, then forgiveness is not fantasy. If he rose, then death itself has been defeated. In the quiet of that first morning, history pivoted on an empty tomb. And the echo of that moment still rolls across centuries. He is not here. He is risen, and the world has never been the same. And so the question remains, not only for history, but for you. If the tomb was empty, what does that mean for your life? The resurrection is not just an ancient claim carved into the past. It is an invitation to hope when the world feels dark, to believe that endings are not final, to trust that beyond suffering, beyond fear, beyond death itself, there is life. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it stirred something deeper within you, thank you for watching. This is Beyond Time, where history, faith, and truth collide. If you want more cinematic journeys into the moments that shaped eternity, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and become part of a community that dares to ask the biggest questions. Until next time, stay curious, stay seeking, and remember, some moments don't just change history, they echo beyond time.